Welcome, everyone, to the Politics of Survival. I'm your host, Tara Reade, and it's been another wild ride for the United States of America and of course, the world, because the U.S. is kind of foreign policy is like they're like toddlers stomping around, wreaking destruction wherever they go. But I'm really happy. I decided this show I wanted, rather than having a guest, I'm going to have the founder of Indie News Network, who is my senior producer and content creator himself and channel creator. And basically my podcast wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the work of Reef and Greg and particularly Indie. And he lifts up a lot of us that are in this space. And we're all kind of a motley crew of different political beliefs and different ideas, but yet we have one thing in common. We're all suppressed by the Western media, and we also have a respect for one another and try to, just lift each other up as much as we can and get past the shadow bans and the censoring. And so I really want to highlight how much work Indie puts into this, because my podcast is not funded. It's not sponsored. It's not funded. Everyone volunteers, including myself, and Indie puts in hours and hours of work, making sure it's on all the different platforms and also on Substack. And he does that for many people. And he's very much an unsung hero in this space. So I wanted to give that shout out. And so he's going to join me today, and we're going to talk about some of the recent events. And I got the honor of going to the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. And I will be talking about some of that with him, some of my adventures, and also my book that finally came out in Ruski, in Russian. So without further ado, I'm going to bring in Indie. Hi, Indie.
Oh my God, that is like I'm on the verge of crying. Like that. That's really, really nice. I really appreciate, that you had all of that. And it's all true. And I love it. I love you. We all love you. It's just, wow. Wow. You just stunned me into silence. There's so much I want to say, but I certainly do still feel like a guest on your show, and I'm honored to be a guest on your show. And hello to all of the watching audience, and thank you all so much for supporting Tara. When I started, and when Reef and I got together 2.5, almost 3 years ago at this point, and started to talk about forming an independent network of streamers and writers. Originally, we didn't know who to kind of contact. We wanted to keep everybody was kind of small and starting out. And Tara actually was one of the biggest names that we talked to. I had met Tara through, funny enough, Katie Halper's chat, because I was modding Katie's channel at the time. And I reached out to Tara and I said, we're thinking about doing this thing. Would you be interested? And she said, absolutely. And much to my surprise and pleasant surprise. And she joined our Zoom call and agreed to join us, and said this sounds like a really interesting project. Now, she was still podcasting for RT at the time. And then a couple of months later, of course, the war in Ukraine started, sanctions started, and RT decided to terminate the contract for the podcast. And we had to figure out. They didn't
really terminate the contract, because there was
just
no
not renew it.
Yeah. But we didn't really have a contract. It was like one of those things where they just wanted to help out, and they were trying to lift my contents as well. My podcast has never made any money, just so you know. I mean,
right. No, it's all volunteer.
It's all volunteer. But remember our little honeymoon period with YouTube, we thought we were going to monetize, and we thought, oh my goodness, we're going to, and then they demonetized me. And I've tried since to appeal, or tried to get monetized again, and it just never goes anywhere. And so there you have it. We're still on YouTube a little bit, and then we're on Rockfin and Rumble. Rumble's been really good to us. I think Rumble's been amazing, actually. And then, of course, X is exploding. And now, I wanted to thank you for all the work you do for everyone, the very talented. I want to give a shout out also. My theme song, which I love, which Reef plays at the beginning, is actually composed by someone who's really dear to my heart. So and he's a musician and he does so much work. And I just kind of wanted to talk about him for a minute. And he just did a show with Due Dissidence. And how did you find us, by the way? Because you brought us together. How did you find all of us, Indy?
I've been watching and supporting independent media. I around the Bernie time, 2020, I had really stopped watching corporate media. And after I saw what happened at MSNBC and CNN, and they basically had turned the entire momentum against the progressive movement and against the Bernie movement. Now, I learned in hindsight that really was kind of an illusion at the whole time. Right. And that it could be eliminated with 2 phone calls, which meant that it really wasn't the coalition we felt it was. And now looking at it 3 years later, it certainly hasn't held together the coalition that we thought it was. But my belief at the time, and it still is that corporate media influenced so many people who were on board the Bernie train that was like, yeah, well, I don't know if he can do this thing with Trump. And then they russiagated him and he russiagated himself. And then you had Chris Hayes or Chris Matthews from MSNBC talking about hangings in Central Park and just scaring the crap out of mom.
Oh, that's right.
Right. They were scaring the crap out of grandma and grandpa. Right. Mm-hmm. So you saw all of these things happening. And I was like, look, independent media is where it's at. They're the only ones telling the truth. The ones that are not corporate funded, that are user funded, that have no stake in telling, in lying on behalf of an advertiser. They are completely, focused on getting the actual story and getting the real truth out from the people that it's happening to.
Yeah. And a lot of us are politically homeless, right? Like I'm not in any camp of any political. In fact, when they did, by the way, I'll have Reef put this up, but I'm on a new list or ecosystem of the Ukraine kill list comes out, enemies of the government of Ukraine, and then they come out with different what they consider Russian content creators and journalists, enemies of Ukraine. And I, of course, because I'm very outspoken, that I think that the military operation was necessary to protect the people of Donbass, and Russia had to go in and protect their borders. And I'm very against the proxy war the U.S. and NATO is fighting against Russia. And because of my views, and in 2019, as everyone recalls, I told publicly, I said, if Joe Biden becomes president, he will go to war with Russia. And here we are. We're on the verge of nuclear war. And because of his bombastic, diplomatic policy that's now becoming just, with Gaza thrown in there and, millions of people being affected by the war machine, it's psychopathic at this point. And he is a psychopath, and I know that personally. But they really came after us. So this is a new one where they try to put us in ecosystems. And my ecosystem is between the Libertarians and Green Party, between Jill Stein and Ron Paul. And I'm a neighbor of Tucker, I guess, on this graph. And it's hilarious because it's like, I think they literally couldn't figure out, is she Green Party? Is she Libertarian? What is she? Because I'm not, obviously, and, I'm independent. So.
And they didn't mention INN. I was disappointed they didn't mention INN at all. But that you're part of an independent network. But then again, that there were a lot of people that are.
It's better actually.
Yeah, they're kind of considered. There were a lot of people that are.
It's better actually.
Yeah, they're kind of considered
notorious
on that list. Look, you saw Max Blumenthal on there, and a lot of the gray zoners. Yeah, I mean, there was a huge list, and I actually made a list of all of the Indie Media Award honorees, and we created an awards category for all of the independent streamers and journalists and outlets that don't get the kind of recognition because they're not playing the corporate game. So we made something that recognizes the people that fight for Julian Assange and press freedom, and that fight against the corporate machine. And Tara's right behind that too.
I mean, Julian Assange is sitting languishing still in Belmarsh prison. And I was talking to a colleague yesterday and I said, all right, there was all this publicity just about, there was almost like this push and pull, like maybe the Biden administration was finally going to drop those charges. And then everything went quiet again. And it's like, they have no motivation. There's nothing for them they want to make an example out of Julian. And unfortunately, they're just letting him sit there, and it's terrible. And, his health is being affected, and he exposed war crimes, and so yeah, you had Misty Winston, you had others that have been very outspoken. Coming back though, you introduced me to Jett,
yes,
who is a fine musician, and he did the theme to my show. And I was just trying to remember when we were talking, like, wait, how did I meet Jesse? And it was through you for sure. And I just couldn't pinpoint exactly when, but we hooked up, all of us, when I think on that Zoom call. And then Jesse did Sabi Sab's, which I love, her theme song. And I was like, I want to be a cool kid like Sabby. I'm still trying to be as cool as Sabby.
We're all trying to be as cool as Sabby.
Yes, and then and so I sent him like ideas, and literally within 48 hours, Jesse came back with this beautiful intro and outro. And he was like, is this okay? And I was like, oh my God, it's brilliant. And like, I don't go anywhere without my intro and outro. I love that. And yeah, and he does amazing spoken word songs. He does good covers. Yeah, and so you just had him performing in Due Dissidence, right? Like,
yes.
He was live.
So Jesse joined our network about 6 months after we started it. So the first time you met him probably might have been on that first Zoom call where we invited him. We had a members call in March after about 4 months, and Jesse was invited to join the network at that point. And I think we might have even streamed it. I think it was a rando roundtable. And right. So yeah. I remember, God, that was so long ago at this point. Look at all the stuff we've been through.
I know, because so much has happened. So much has happened, Indy. I mean, like, and we all know what happened. At the time, I was living in California. Then I had to move to Oregon because the people were voting for Biden, and I got evicted. I lost jobs. It was like fucking crazy stuff happening. And then, of course, I was doing my visit to Russia to oversee the translation of this book, which just came out.
Woo, congratulations.
Yes. And the Writers Union of Moscow has asked me to do a presentation, so I'll be doing that next month. And that's really cool. But so I was here for 5 days, had like 5 days worth of clothing with me, and then was told if I go back, could be facing arrest or worse, like they were trying to eliminate me. And it's when they were really being protective of Biden. Now this year, so I didn't, I stayed in Moscow, and then I went ahead and said to RT, hey, look, I know I write some op-eds for you, but like, I think I have to stay. And they were wonderful to me. And Margarita Simenon and Maria Butina made sure I was taken care of, and that, because it's very intimidating when you can't just one can't just stay in a country, right? And you can't just be like, yeah, well, it's dangerous for me to go back, so I just can't go back. There are rules, and like you can be criminally negligent if you don't have the proper visa, if you don't do the proper things. So, and everything's in Russian. So luckily for me, Maria Butina had an assistant take me to the office, and there's like, tons of documents you have to go through. You have to go through a security background check. They have to make sure your story is valid. And FSB is very serious, just like the CIA. So they did a whole vetting process. And then I was granted, within 90 days, I was granted my political asylum. And I've been in political asylum, and that made some people angry back in the States. And then, as you know, John Kirby chose to do a couple of press conferences about telling me how safe it was for me to come back anytime. So we'll see, right? He said it was fine. Yeah. Sure. So, yeah. So that's kind of it. And then you stuck with me, and I was like, I remember we had a conversation. I contacted you and I said, Indy, I don't want to bring you and Reef down, and like, I don't want to cause problems. Like, do you still want me? And you said yes. So
yeah, no, this is when we need each other the most, right. I mean, it.
Oh, what was really cool that I forgot to add that you did? And this was so fantastic. When I did the press conference, because I was so mad about the threats I was getting about going back to the US, and then, even the death threats. I decided to do a press conference, an international press conference in Moscow. Well, in the United States, that didn't go over as well with some of the authorities, but it did get thanks to you, it got seen because you aired it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, I put it out on your channel on INN as well as on the Rumble stuff, and And thank goodness for Rumble as an outlet, because we have been censored quite a bit, as well as Substack, because we can build our own email list and we can go unfiltered to the people who actually want to subscribe and get the messaging. And you can get there at tarareade.substack.com. You can subscribe to Tara's Substack. She can write there if she wants. She occasionally has. I know she wrote Ode to a Writer's Cat when she lost her cat last.
Shay died.
Yeah, when Shay died. But normally we're putting up episodes of The Politics of Survival. And what we're doing right now is I realized that we had missed, like, from before you had gone to Russia. So we're going back weekly and posting older ones until we get caught up. And then we'll start, and from the time that Fiorello was on back in April, we'll start going forward from there until we catch up again. And I'm sure we will soon enough. But yeah, I mean, you've interviewed so many people. I mean, it's been such an incredible show already. You know, I don't know if people realize that Tara really had never done a podcast like this before, and we had to kind of figure out how to do all of this and how to make this and present this. And, you know, Tara had ideas about how to do a show, and we didn't really know what to do. So we just all kind of figured it out. Like you said, you know, a ragtag bunch of motley crew. And but I
homeless,
you know, and again, shout out to my brother Reef who works the board right there, and I sit and I hang out with him all day, and Colin as well. Mm-hmm. I mean, we are a big family. I mean, we are really close. Yeah. We back each other up. The whole point of INN when it first started was, let's share each other's content. First of all, let's go as guests on each other's shows. Second of all, so here we are finally. But yes, we're here to do that. And one of these days we'll have you on How Did We Miss That, which is my show, but the time zones don't really line up right now, so we might have to pre-record it. But we're also going to write and co-publish together and co-stream together on the network channels. Yeah. And yeah. I think that's been a success so far in helping to amplify the people. You know, Jesse and Snow Himbo and Angel all say that without INN, they wouldn't be where they were. And I'm so proud of that.
Show. I mean, I wouldn't have a show. There's for sure. Yeah.
That warms my heart. And, you know, Jesse, so you were asking about Jesse in New York City this weekend.
Yeah.
So Jesse was offered an opportunity a couple of months ago when Due Dissidence announced they're doing their first ever live show, and they're doing it in New York City. And hey, Jesse, would you come and perform and be our opening act and perform live for the crowd? Wow, that was a big thing, and we had to figure out, how do we get Jesse to the New York area? He lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan area. So how do we get him to New York? So we got him a flight, and we've been doing crowdfunding for a computer, but I left that alone. I actually picked up the tab myself. I have extra airline miles, so just a little inside baseball. I picked up the flight to get Jesse, and he stayed right here in Casa Indy, right in my office, which is where I'm streaming from and talking to you right now. There's a queen size bed right there, so he slept in that bed, and he spent the entire day on Saturday with my kids, and they were in the pool, and we did a barbecue, and it was a real family-like thing. My kids couldn't stop hugging him. They love him so much. They called him Uncle Jesse. It was so sweet. Oh my God.
That's awesome.
And then Sunday we went into the city and he performed these outstanding shows, about 20 minutes, 25 minutes each, on the Due Dissidence channels. You can see them. I think they're up right now on their channels on YouTube and Rumble. And wow, he blew the house away, and he started everything off great and set the tone for each of the shows. So it was phenomenal.
Oh, that's fabulous. You know, I'm just really happy that you were able to make that connection. And Greg does the graphics, and he does a wonderful job. And I love his content. And, you know, everyone's developing their own kind of, their own kind of show and their own kind of talents. And I think, you know, you've provided like the platform to do that, Indy. So thank you for all of that. But we just have to make sure that you get love too, and that you get, support that you need to keep it going. I mean, on one hand, we could really use a sponsor, and that would be help. But then when you get an infusion of money, it's like you have to answer to that person, whoever it is. And so, to be honest with you, I've been spoiled because we do this for free. Like we do whatever we want, and we have on whoever we want. And there's Yeah, there's a lot of freedom to that, isn't there?
Well, we've had some people on that people haven't been too thrilled about on your show specifically, for sure. So we've stirred up some controversy. Look, the first Garland-Nixon episode got pulled off of YouTube. They didn't like something you guys said, and they never even told us what it was.
Oh, really? We still don't know. It's a mystery. But,
no.
I've had like some people on, like Maria Butina's been on a couple times. I've had Victor Boot. Yeah, and I've had Victor Boot, and I've had
Dimitri,
I've had like
Ambassador Polyansky. I mean, look, the honor of having a Russian ambassador on our little independent network in just a short, like, wow. I mean, you start to look back at some of the things that we've done as a group.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's a brilliant diplomat. And then, of course, we had, I'm trying to like go over in my mind. We had Tig Hickey, who's very outspoken about Palestine. He's the Irish comedian.
Minar.
And so that was really, I'm sorry?
You had Minar from Mint Press News on about Palestinian journalism and
that was amazing.
Wow, she's outstanding. Again,
she was really
so many award-winning journalists. You had Wyatt and Vanessa Beeley and Eva Bartlett.
Reade, Vanessa Beeley, Eva Bartlett.
Okay,
yes, all of them.
Kit Clarenberg, so many great journalists, and
they're all on the same list that I'm on, the Ukraine enemy list, the U.S. State Department enemy list. It's so funny. We're all on the same list.
Yep.
It's interesting. But, we have to talk about something, though, that I think it's a little controversial, and you can step out of it or step in it. It doesn't matter to me because I'm not in the U.S. anymore, so I don't give a fuck. But, I was just thinking about, like, the lefty kind of space. Like, I really admire the work that that Katie Halper and Aaron Mate are doing about Palestine. I really admire their dedication or whatever. But a lot of those folks are just radio silent when it comes to me. And I was with them at the Rage Against the War Machine when we were speaking out and, defending Russia's logic about having the NATO up against their borders and how terrible the proxy war was and millions of dollars going to this. We were all on the same page, but like radio silence since I've come to Russia. They don't cover me. They don't talk about me. They don't talk about you. They don't talk about our network at all.
No.
But I'm just saying it was interesting. They used to, but they don't. And, I have to give credit to where credit's due. Bree did a couple of times after I came to Russia. She lifted my story, had me on the Hill. Now she's fired. Sad. And then, of course, Megyn Kelly had me on, but that was, she was a little upset about Russia. I mean, like she definitely was, not that supportive. Tucker Carlson met with me in Moscow and was very neutral. And that's what I like about him. Like, he's just neutral. He's not interested in gotcha interviews. He just wants to get the information. And so his focus was more on the DOJ weaponization. That was that angle. But I just think it's interesting, like Aaron Mate, Max Blumenthal, Kit Clarenberg, those folks that I lifted over and over again and like recommended to the UN and, and did all that. And Anya, and I've met them. They are silent. What's up with that?
Yeah. What's up with that? I wish I knew.
I don't know. Because I still lift their work and I still love their work and I still lift it. But you know what? We're at a time now where I could be facing charges. I could be facing whatever. Where are you guys? Because I'm there for you. Where are you? So if someone wants to send them that message, text them, tweet them, ask them. How come you're not talking about this? How come you're not talking about this? Because they're coming, the State Department's now starting to have gray zone on their map. And I'm telling you, they're coming for all of us, right or left or in between. It doesn't matter. And I was saying that too, because I get a lot of MAGA supporters. And even though, I'm an independent voter, and I think it's interesting because I say to them, look, they're coming for January 6th, and they've done terrible things to January 6th people, but they're also doing it to the Uhuru group. Uhuru group is facing their trial in September. And why is Katie Halper and Max Blumenthal and all of those people, why aren't they shouting at the top of their lungs about the Uhuru group? Those people are facing 10 years in prison.
What about the Cop City? The Cop City people too.
I'm sorry?
The Cop City protesters that, they're looking at literally like RICO charges and domestic terrorism charges for protesting the Stop Cop City. On that. Yeah, it's pretty
tell
pretty
me
brutal.
the rest of that.
We've covered that a couple of times on How Do We Miss That already. But there have been protests. I mean, the very one was famously shot and killed as they were protesting. This is in the Atlanta forest, the Weilani. It's a protected forest that they are that the cops are bulldozing. It's already cost well over $100 million of the city's money. It was originally slated to only cost about $30 million, so the cost has skyrocketed. It's corporate funded in part, or corporate endorsed, and it's a big gift for the cops to be able to practice urban assault. And guess who that urban assault is against? All right, they're talking now about setting up cop cities like this all over the country. Atlanta was the first one, and these protesters, these brave protesters, saw the canary in the coal mine. And they started to protest the forest, and they chained themselves to equipment. They chained themselves together. And one very famously, in a standoff with police, Manuel Tortuguita was shot and murdered, shot with his hands raised 52 times by police. And there's been a big cover up by the Georgia Bureau of Investigations. We've covered that quite a bit to try to cover up for the cops. There was one of the protesters actually went around and put the cops' address on one of the cops' addresses on a flyer in his neighborhood and said, "You have a murderer living amongst you." Well, he got in big trouble for that, and they went and arrested him. But even the people who were trying to fund the bail funds are being charged with domestic terrorism, aiding domestic terrorism, because they're trying to bail these people out.
Do you remember when I had Kyle Seraphin on the show? He's the FBI whistleblower, and he and Steve Friend revealed the FBI doing operations against U.S. citizens, including what they called extreme Catholics. And I come from Catholic background, so that's particularly that's interesting. I just think that's bizarre. But anyway, he was talking about this. This is an example. These people were unarmed. They're pacifists chaining themselves to trees. Is that what you're saying? They didn't have weapons? Nothing?
They were unarmed. The Unicorn Riot, the independent outlet Unicorn Riot, did a tremendous job in covering this in incredible detail for people who want to learn more about Cop City.
I do want to learn more. I didn't know about this, Indy, really. I didn't really know the in-depth. I kind of, so much has happened. It's like one of those things that blips out the radar, but we really need to talk about this domestic terrorism, and we need the bigger platforms to be doing it. We need the Jimmy Dores and the Katie Halpers and the Max Blumenthals. They need to step up, and this is the time.
I'll give a shout out.
They're going to be silenced as well.
I'll give a shout out. Kamal Franklin was very vocal. I believe he lives in the Atlanta area. So he saw all of this happening, and they stonewalled the public from being able to protest at city council meetings. They went out and got over 100,000 local signatures of people who wanted to stop Cop City. And the city council just decided to railroad and push this forward no matter what. They were going to do this.
Hold on. I need to grab my power cord. So Reef, if you're watching, which I assume you are because you're going to be editing, give me a second here. I need to break. Hold on. Sorry.
Well, I can do an INN commercial while she's gone, because I do that quite often. Yep. But what we do, I'm just so grateful for Tara's contribution to the network, and for her contribution to independent media. We need more women in independent media. It is incredibly difficult, I know, and incredibly challenging for women in the independent media space. We have done our best to amplify women who contribute and who write great stuff, from Misty to Fiorella to Tara. Lucy. There have been so many women that have we've helped, that we've tried to help and amplify. I mean, remember, Stebbs even started with us in our network. She published an article earlier this year at Unlimited Hangout with Whitney Webb. I was so happy for her when she got that published. And there was so many great people that I've met, and I'm blessed because of this independent media space. It helped me find community. I mean, before 2020.
Yeah, and because you do feel isolated, don't you? When and it's almost like you're doom scrolling through Twitter or you're doing whatever, and it's like, oh my God, I feel depressed. I feel like my voice doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter, like what I'm doing. And so I think that this is so important that we, that we do this, that we continue to lift up others and lift up ourselves. But Reef, I know, will put in the underneath, he'll put the links about that story we just discussed, and Unicorn Riot and all of that coverage of it. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to also talk about the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum.
That was fascinating. And you were there.
Yeah, I got this really fancy invite from anyway, they invited me, and I got it via email. I was very excited. And then, of course, RT was part of that. And, I was invited to speak on a panel with Karen Schnitzel, who was the former Austrian foreign minister. I mean, she kind of like, think of Lavrov, Sergei Lavrov. Mm-hmm. She was like, or Tony Blinken. She was like the equivalent of that for Austria. She was very outspoken against Russophobia and other things. She's, not a warmonger like most of Europe is right now, following, being vassals for the US. And Putin happened to come to her wedding and danced at her wedding. And this was filmed and publicized. Right after that, Austria seized her house, her bank accounts. They seized her property, everything. And she lost her job.
Wow.
First of all, Russia is a very warm and loving country. It is really clear to me that they do not want to be an enemy of the United States. They don't want to see the United States fail.
We want to mind our own business at the end of the day and build our own life.
Exactly.
That's what
matters. And I think everybody, we're all human beings that want the same thing. We want our children and our grandchildren and our futures to be safe and to have economic prosperity. And I think what's really inspiring about being here is I've met some young entrepreneurs in Russia, and Russia is providing for their citizens education, healthcare, and other infrastructure, housing when it's needed, so that they're able to have a springboard to be entrepreneurs. So in an economic forum like this, they're looking at the innovative future. They're looking at AI. They're looking at different things. And the United States, unfortunately, is looking at war. And there's no path to that anymore. I think that the path is east and the path is not west.
Well, and she lost her job.
Wow.
And so she's now living in other countries as well as Russia. She teaches now in St. Petersburg, and she was able to get her pets, I think, most of them, but she's been through a lot. And she was on the panel. And then Alexander von Bismarck was on the panel, and he was hilarious and fun. I met him outside the panel. We went to a vodka museum restaurant in St. Petersburg, and his family, Bismarck, has a Bismarck vodka, and they featured it there at the restaurant. Anyway, it was really hilarious and fun night, and got to meet his one of his colleagues and Karen's colleagues, who's German, also named Flavio, and who they have a podcast. And Flavio said during that night, he said, "Follow me, Tara. I'm the one good German." And I'm like, yeah, there's one good German. Okay.
Well, no, wait. There's Alina Lipp. You interviewed Alina Lipp. She's a good German too.
Alina Lipp is another good German. She's a wonderful German. She's in Crimea now, and she had to escape. Same thing. Like the government was going to prosecute her for 3 years, criminal, just for her coverage of Donbass. And they seized her bank account and her parents' bank accounts, and she's in her 20s. And they seized her parents' bank accounts, and her mother has nothing to do with politics, is just retired. So her whole family had to leave for Russia. These are just crazy times. And I'm hearing these stories and seeing the documents, and no one's really covering it. And I was thinking, I almost want to write another book, because I have another contract where I can do another book, and it's going to be for the novel. But I was thinking maybe I should do one more nonfiction and just compile all these stories of just the persecution of this time of history that we live in, because It's blowing my mind. It's British. You know, I had Chris Sims on the show. He was being persecuted by the US government and he has no ties to the US. He's a British citizen. He's visited as a tourist, but no ties. They were They were trying to convict him on, because he's a OG of crypto, because he went to North Korea and gave a presentation about crypto.
That was a fascinating conversation. Oh my God, to listen to his story about how they put him into a hotel and he basically wasn't allowed to leave the room other than that or really talk to anybody else. He gave his presentation and he left. He didn't talk about anything political or any. Wow. I mean, just amazing to hear the experience.
And literally the information about crypto came off Google. I mean, it was public information. And then they put him in Saudi prison for months, and the US did. And then Saudi authorities were like, there's no basis for this.
Let's give a big shout out. Let's give a big shout out to Rhoda Sterling, because you didn't mention her earlier. You know, you mentioned Maria Butna, you mentioned some people that have helped you out and stepped up to make sure. But let me tell you, Rhoda Sterling, wow, what she has done and what she does for people when they are desperate and they are lost and they need somebody to help them is phenomenal. And I personally wanted to say thank you to Rhoda for all she's done for you.
Me too. Yeah, she has, and I keep her busy. And Rod is wonderful, and John Levy is my attorney here in the U.S., and he has filed some pretty good filings with the federal against the feds, against the FBI and DOJ for violation of my First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights. And you know, my hope is that I'll be able to testify before Congress, and my hope is that I'll be able to come back and forth between Russia and the United States, because I am an American citizen and I'm an older person that I'm hoping to be a babushka, a grandma, you know, someday. And I want to be able to, you know, come back and forth, and I have a life there and I have a life here.
Well, you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything wrong, and you should be able to travel freely around the world on a U.S. passport.
Yeah.
You know,
I should. You would think. And you know, I have to say, I love Russia. Today is Russia Day, by the way. And so, ura. And,
congratulations to Russia Day.
And I have to say, Andy, I have really positive experiences. And when I talk about all the positives, people think I'm being propagandized or whatever, or that I'm trying to do that. And I'm not. I'm just telling the truth. It's really a wonderful life here. I mean, for many people, for Russians, for foreigners, but like, they really are very welcoming. And I would just encourage anyone who can to get a tourist visa and just come check it out. Because what it'll do is open your eyes to what the US government is really like, how they're gaslighting the whole population just to perpetuate war. And they could end humanity as we know it, perpetuating these fictions. So we have to take responsibility. Mom and dad aren't going to save us. We are mom and dad. We are the grownups in the room. Because I'll tell you what, in DC right now, there are no grownups in the room. There's a lot of feeble-minded, you know, psychopaths that want war because it profits them. And I don't know what else. But I feel like we've kind of crossed the Rubicon. It's not about politics, Democrat, Republican. It's not about any of that. It's about good and evil. And I'm usually not that binary, like, you know, like saying good, evil, and it's only that. No, I'm usually like, oh, there's a gray area or whatever. No, we're in a battle. It's existential. And it feels like the Democrats and Republicans, and I'm talking about like Lindsey Graham, who never saw a country he didn't want to bomb, like people like that, those conservatives, George W., all of them, you know, Cheney, that whole crowd. And then the Democrats have become the party of war, but it's evil. And now, like, I think the greatest evil, and it's just breaking my heart, is what's happening in Gaza. And you see women and children in Palestine just being, you know, living in tents, like just trying to find some safe place to be, trying to find water and food, and they're being starved to death and then bombed. It's just, it's unimaginable. And we're all just watching it, and the U.S. is funding it.
Yeah, we're not we're not just watching it. We're funding it, and we're helping to arm the Israelis and selling them the weapons with the money that we're giving them. It's insane. Again, we've covered this extensively on INN News, on INN as a network across all of our shows, something I'm incredibly proud of. I'm an anti-Zionist Jew, as most people who watch the network know, maybe not everyone in your audience. I have been incredibly outspoken against what Israel has been doing, and against the fact that Israel is built on ethnic cleansing and genocide to begin with, and that's all being done in the name of a religion. And the conflation of a religion that I was raised on and the country that exists that's murdering other people on behalf of a religion that not everyone subscribes to what they're doing. It's a real challenge. I give a lot of credit to Richard Medhurst in the last few years in opening my eyes to the worldwide struggle of the Palestinian people. We are really brainwashed here in America, especially the American Jewish community. They really work hard to keep you kind of look the other way. Don't look over there. And they don't want you to pay attention, because the minute you do, you see the horrors and you see the equation, the equivalence of what happened just 75 years ago or 80 years ago to the Jewish people in Germany. And you say, how are you treating the Palestinian people in the land that they allowed you to come into the same way at this point? Not only that, but you could see that the Israeli government has really used the American model of how they treated the Native American people here in how the treatment of the Palestinian people. So when they say that they use the American system as a model, I think that that's actually pretty accurate because of how we've treated the Native American people over the last couple of 100 years, putting them into reservations, continually squeezing them, starving them, making them have fewer and fewer opportunities, and having them be an insular community. They have a lot of alcoholism and unemployment amongst the Native American population, and that starts to decline a people. And I think that that's what they've been trying to do with the Palestinians, and now they're just bombing the hell out of them until there's none left. And it's so sad to see, and so frustrating and angering. And I wake up in the morning, I say, please let me not see a dead kid in my news feed this morning on Twitter. Well, not today. Sorry.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Thanks, Israel, because it's the only one that's doing that. They're the only ones that are murdering children every day. Let's not forget who's doing that every day.
And the U.S., the U.S. and Israel. And I think, you have to remember, too, that AIPAC has been so part and parcel of the way the U.S. policy has been shaped by AIPAC and by the way they're paying off our politicians to do their bidding. And, RT had me on. In fact, Reif, if you could put up the RT clip of me speaking just the other day right now, that would be good. And basically, in that clip, I talk about how, actually there's two clips. Sorry, I did two different, I did one on Ukraine and one on Israel. So the Israel clip is what I'm talking about, Reif, but when you put that up. But in that clip, I discussed AIPAC, and one of the questions that RT had asked me, the presenter had said, hey, what about the candidates for US president? Are there any that are going to call out Israel? And there's not. I mean, RFK is like, we could go on and on about RFK, but he's like in the pocket. He gets tons of funding and support from Zionists. So does Donald Trump, and so does Joe Biden. Like, that policy is not going to be changing.
Jill Stein's the only one, really. I mean,
who is
Jill Stein with the Greens is struggling to get on ballots.
Jill Stein with the Greens, but again, it's like, and what I want to say about that is they use the Green Party. Democrats will donate to the Green Party, Republicans will donate to the Green Party to split the vote, just like Democrats will donate to the Libertarians to split the Republican vote. You see what I mean? Like they just use it like they did back with Ross Perot.
Well, not only that,
they got Ross Perot.
The Democrats this week challenged. Jill Stein got close to 90,000 signatures. The deadline was last week. They had to get 45,000. They almost doubled it. And New York challenged so many signatures that they ended up at like 42,000, and they missed getting on the New York ballot. So they will not, as far as I know, be on the New York ballot for the 2024 election. You'll have to write Jill Stein in. As far as I know, that may not be the end, but.
Well, in RFK, even though I don't like his position on Israel, he is anti-war with other conflicts, and he is calling out some other things. But, I want to remind everyone to read a book. There's a book out by Amaryllis Fox. She's a former CIA agent and for many years, and she happens to be his campaign manager. So if you're looking to get away from the military, industrial, and intelligence complex, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is immersed.
She's also his daughter-in-law.
That's it. Yeah, she's his daughter-in-law and his campaign manager. And if you read her book, which I did because I wanted to learn more about her, she's very immersed.
She's his second campaign manager. Let's not forget she's his second campaign manager after Dennis Kucinich left, following how horrible RFK's behavior after January 6th, after October 7th had been. My question is what took you so long? Because we were fighting with Booby over the summer. Lucy and Greg and all the INN folks were standing up at the events that he was at with Shmuley and challenging his views as a Zionist at that point and his Israel views, as well as his views about Sirhan and the Palestinian people. And it was interesting to see what happened there.
Yeah, and from my perspective, it's almost like this election's rigged. It's fully rigged. I don't know how yet, but Donald Trump might win, but he's not going to win. Like, they're not going to allow him to govern. That's APAC. Clear. In fact, they're talking about I'm sorry?
AIPAC has already won the election. It's already over. They've won all of Congress, and they've got all the candidates. So Israel is really going to be the winner of this election.
Yeah, but Biden, as far as Biden goes, what they'll do is at the convention, and this is my prediction, and Dean, you may or may not agree with me, but I think that at the convention, Michelle Obama is going to step in with Gavin Newsom because they don't want Kamala on the ticket anymore. And the only way to do that, get rid of her as well as Biden, is for Biden to step down, say there's a medical issue or something will happen, or maybe, something will happen, and to precipitate that. And then he will, or some of the, terrible bribery, corruption will finally come to light. But I think they are going to try to get Michelle Obama and then Gavin Newsom on that ticket. And then you're going to see the Hollywood machine and the whole thing and everyone get that Trump derangement syndrome. So we are in a information war. We are in a war. There's for sure for America. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts about it becoming a civil war?
I think that Americans can be brainwashed into hating their neighbors, but I think that there is too much. The minute they start talking, they all realize how much we have in common. And we realize that we all just loathe the government and loathe the people who represent us and all want things to change. And when we start talking about individual issues, one to one, what's bothering you about this and what's bothering you about that, 96% of the stuff we agree on, or 90%, then it's the cultural stuff, but it's also what the medical stuff that they're pushing with, that are making the Republicans crazy. It's a corporate funded thing. It's a big pharma funded thing.
And who's exercising all of these is the Obama former staff. Like this, what we have right now is all the Obama folks came over into the Biden thing and they're running the show. Obama's running the show behind the scenes already.
Well,
and he's going to continue to do so. And his foreign policy is, well, it can't be Tony Blinken. I've met Tony Blinken's not capable of that.
I'd say it's Jake Sullivan. I'd say it's West Exec Advisors. I'd say it's Michelle Flournoy, who did not get the job that they wanted. I think it was Blinken to originally have. She couldn't get the job. I think Victoria Nuland is somewhere behind the scenes. I think Samantha Power.
The scenes, Anita Dunn is the evil player behind as well, even though she's off the official payroll.
Samantha Power with USAID. She's also a monstrous gaslighting figure within the administration.
Oh, she doesn't like me at all. Like that's she's had a lot to say about me. And then Ben Smith, who's acting as their does their hit pieces for them with Semaphore. He used to be with New York Times. Yeah, like he likes to take out a few people on his way out. So that's Ben Smith. Yeah. And you have, of course, people I knew, Ted Kaufman, Dennis Toner, that are behind the scenes with Biden, that are still reaping in the benefits, reaping in the money. And then Leon Panetta, who was my old boss, is sitting on the board of Raytheon. I don't know if he still is, but he was as of 2 years ago or last year during the military operation. So he's, and Raytheon, I don't know if you were, I had that on my show. There was a call with their board, and they were surpassing almost $1 trillion in profits from these. Yeah. So they're doing okay.
Well, Lloyd Austin, who is the Secretary of Defense, walked off the Raytheon board back into the Secretary's office. And my guess is that once Biden is no longer in office, or he leaves the Secretary of Defense, he will go right back to the Raytheon board while enriching his
and they probably
board
kept
members.
his shares.
Well,
yeah, they kept
give
his
them
shares
up.
with his family or whatever.
He had to
give his shares
them
up, but
right.
not the money.
Right.
Yeah, but he was able to cash out or put some of that with family, and that's what they do. Or they get their sons, like what Pelosi does and what John Kerry did. They get their sons or daughters, they get them on the board of, like, what they did with Burisma.
Right. They funnel it through the kids.
3 of those politicians. Yeah. And they were getting 30, many
$50,000 a month, $60,000 a month to do nothing, to have no expertise, basically for their access to their parents.
Oh, they did something. They did bribery, corruption, money laundering. Oh, and cocaine, right? And
lots
human
of crack.
trafficking.
Lots of crack.
Yeah, lots of crack. And then, of course, a little bit of underage child trafficking there was on the video. And I posted about that, and X censored me. And I was like, dude, I just reposted a report on it from the laptop, which has been verified, of him with an underage child.
What a surprise,
in
right?
a very compromising Christian. And it's amazing how the censorship is like, and they've now admitted, as of 2 days ago, that the FBI admitted, yes, it is not Russian disinformation. The Hunter laptop is real.
Well, except that
all the stuff on there.
We've known that. Okay. Michael Schellenberger and Elon Musk in the Twitter files a year and a half ago released that the FBI knew about it, that they were engaging in tabletop exercises with Twitter and with the social media companies to pre-bunk the story. It's amazing. And they're trying to do this again for this election. I actually covered that last week or this week on How Did We Miss That with Reif, how some of the things that these election integrity partnerships and the University of Washington and Stanford University, in conjunction with Silicon Valley, the NGOs and the U.S. government, are all working in cahoots to come up with ways to push their narrative for elections and to censor the disinformation, quote unquote, that they feel is coming out, which is really just legitimate criticism against politicians, exposing their records, exposing their crimes, exposing their conflicts of interest. But that's inconvenient to the narrative. So that must be dealt with for the sake of the election.
Yeah, it's propaganda. So the very thing they're accusing us of, when we're trying to raise the truth, when we're trying to raise up facts and figures, and we're trying to expose crimes and corruption, they're calling us propagandists? No, they are. They are the propagandists. And the US officials are like masters at this, right? They're masters at turning it around and accusing the other of the very thing they're doing, like human rights abuses, or there's no democracy. And then you look at our country and I'm like, is there democracy? Is there freedom? I'm worried about if I can go to travel to the US ever again. What is that? Why do I have to worry? I didn't commit a crime. Why do all my colleagues who go back and forth, trying to cover different conflicts throughout the world, why are they so nervous now when they go through an airport in the United States?
Look what happened to Scott Ritter.
People are terrified. Yeah. Let's get to that. So let's get back to the St. Petersburg Economic Forum.
Yes.
So that I got to speak on this wonderful panel, and we talked about, was the propaganda successful by the US, vilifying Russia? And I said, no. I said, they've tried, but I think people are seeing through it. They don't like it. They don't want it. And 70% of the people don't want the proxy war. And now, Biden's approval ratings are in the bucket. But if you want to see it, Reif will put it up, my panel, and there's a link to it. And you can watch me on the panel talk with some other folks, and we talked about, those issues about Russophobia and all of that. And I was really point blank about just how dire things are for Americans, because, we've got 600,000 homeless, we've got 70% child poverty rates, and millions of dollars are going to these wars, and the infrastructure is falling apart. And what I was just told is that New York City is looking worse than when I saw it last year. Like, it's degrading more. And, it makes me sad, because I'm a loyal American who loved my country. And I feel like I keep having to speak up because people are so scared to speak.
Yeah. Actually, there was something that Russell had talked about. There was this kind of streamer who has been doing an entire series. It's partly fear mongering and partly propaganda so that he can raise money for his channel. But he's talking about how New York is going down the tubes, and he's constantly showing these videos of people living in tents in New York City. I mean, I drive through New York. I don't really see that when I do. Certainly, there are a lot of issues that are being caused by Joe Biden in this country. I think that there is a 70%, against the war in Ukraine. And it's amazing that even 30% are supporting it at this point. And this week they even approved, and they changed the bill to allow to send weapons to known neo-Nazi groups. What the heck is going on there? But that's only so they can continue funding and arming Azov, apparently, which is beyond nuts. Yeah. But unfortunately, I do think that propaganda against Russia has been effective in a lot of circles in the United States, where these people only watch corporate media, and there really is no other voice. And part of the sanctions that happened when Russia invaded the Ukraine to defend the people of the Donbass, people never really point out the reason why Russia did this is because they were bombing the people of the Donbass, and the people of the Donbass
were bombing their own citizens. Yeah, the Ukraine
right.
government, the Kiev regime, was bombing their own people.
And the people of the Donbass were begging Vladimir Putin to intervene on their behalf because they're Russian-speaking population, and they're being persecuted because they speak Russian. And they would like, could you please help us? That was how it got started. Yeah. And of course, NATO was secretly funding and arming and pushing all of this from behind the scenes, which we then found out afterwards. And they were scuttling any potential peace deals. This all actually happened. And my God. So I think the propaganda, though, on MSNBC and CNN and Fox News has actually worked on a lot of Americans, and there is still a lot of Russophobia, and you still get a lot of "you're a Russian bot" and "you're a Russian plant." So I still think that there is a lot of work for us to do to overcome that, because the power of corporate media is so strong in this country. People are addicted to their Netflix and their Hulu and their Amazon Primes, and all of this stuff puts out content that perpetuates that same narrative: Russia bad, USA good, all the time. And it gets reinforced in every movie without them even realizing it. Jett wrote a song called Red Pilled about that. He actually performed it. Due Dissidence. I would encourage everyone to go listen on jessijett.bandcamp.com. Check that out. But yeah, getting back to St. Petersburg, that forum was phenomenal. I watched it.
It was beautiful. Yeah, it was beautiful. And then if you were able to go out like I did and go out among, the displays and talk to some of the Russian people that were there, a lot of business people there, and a lot of international people there, 153 countries. There was such a jubilance or a happiness because they're moving away from the Western hegemony and the dollar, and they're happy. They're building alliances and economic, paths that don't have to include the United States, frankly, and Great Britain and all of that, and the West that has been colonizing. And, Vladimir Putin said something very poignant, during his speech. He said, we're not colonizers. We was talking about Africa and different places that they're collaborating with, India and so on. We're not, he said, Russia's not colonizers. We are interested in economic cooperation, and that's, and innovation. And also he's keenly interested, as are the whole world is in AI, and it being, it being done in a way that doesn't put humanity at risk. And I think there's a lot of concern from every government in the world, and sort of there's a, you know how there was a space race? Now I think there's an AI race, or maybe it's already over and China probably won, I would think. But we'll see, because China is doing a lot of stuff that we haven't even seen yet. And just what I have seen is pretty remarkable. But the US has, you know, tried to. So, but the US has had a brain drain. You have some people that are going to other countries, and Russia has a lot of really brilliant people in tech as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But what I would say is that the multipolar world is here, and unfortunately, the US, I think, has missed that boat. And what I saw at this forum was really,
we've been fighting that BRICS alliance, you know, and basically, you know, treating it as an anti-NATO type of organization. I mean, I'm kind of, in a way, in my mind, waiting for NATO to effectively declare BRICS to be an enemy, which is going to be interesting, because there are some NATO members that are actually going to be a part of BRICS, and they're all part of the United Nations. So what ends up happening at the United Nations, which, by the way, has been completely ignored and stonewalled while Russia has been in control of the chair. They've brought phenomenal guests and people speaking truth to power and telling what's actually happening around the world. And it's being completely ignored by everyone in the United States, because it's coming from the dissenting voice and against the narrative that's been pushed. So that's where I think that a lot of this stuff that you're saying, you know, the country is tired of it. I agree, they're tired of the narrative, but a lot of them don't even realize they're being pushed a narrative because they don't hear the other side. And that's what the sanctions kind of did in getting rid of RT, and in RT America then going away as a result. You're really not hearing very many American voices, and foreign voices for that matter, especially on corporate funded or corporate TV, on any kind of network or cable TV. And that's what most of, you know, the 50 and over crowd in America still watches.
Yeah, and it's sad because there's still like so much. You saw in Europe this week, they described them as far right people that won because they're throwing out the neolibs in some of these countries, like France is, I think Macron's shaking in his boots and so on and so forth. But then you see one of my heroes, you know this because I really want her to come on the show, and I really just admire her, is, you know, I've always said I wanted to be Claire Daly when I grow up, but the Irish MEP, and she just lost her election, and I am so devastated.
You know,
God, I don't know what the numbers were or whatever, but like, she's such a queen. She's so amazing. She's such a warrior. And, that was like the lone voice on the European, you know, when you'd hear talking about these endless wars, she was like one of the lone voices against, she and Mick Wallace.
So strong,
so,
you know, And I think that there was an effort to fund some kind of a campaign to make sure that she did not continue, because she is causing a thorn in the side to Ursula von der Leyen at the EU Parliament. She's been causing a lot of problems.
Frau Genocide, that's what we call her.
Frau Genocide,
Frau
that's
Genocide,
right.
Ursula.
And because of those incredibly powerful speeches at the EU Parliament, I mean, Mick Wallace is going to make them too, but coming from you know, a mother and you know, from a woman who's so strong and so outspoken and has such conviction, she's phenomenal. I mean, I can't gush enough about her, you know, and she spoke for a lot of us, and she spoke for the Palestinian people incredibly strongly when there were few out there with the courage to do so. So yeah, she'll be incredibly missed, but I'm excited to see what she's going to do next. Maybe she'll run for Prime Minister of Ireland, for all we know.
There you have it. That would be wonderful if she did. But but that whole experience at St. Petersburg was really something. And I'm going to have Reef put up some of the clips and some of the photos that I took while I was there. I also got to talk with Larry Johnson. I got to do a little interview with him for like 6 minutes. We got on the sidelines, and he and let's come back to what you had brought up before. And
Americans, they're going to experience what the Argentinians did in the 1980s. So during the 1970s, the Argentines, their money was golden. They could travel day trips from Buenos Aires to Miami for shopping and then fly back because their peso was so strong. Well, then they lost that. And then they were faced with hyperinflation. And all of a sudden, they were no longer the wealthiest among nations. They were one of the poorest. And that's where the United States is headed, towards impoverishment, because ultimately to be wealthy in the world means to have exchange and relationships with other countries. The United States has embarked on a policy of saying, how many countries can we piss off?
Yeah,
right.
Well, I mean, and more than piss off, there's been the military industrial complex, right?
Right.
Reade and Lockheed Martin and BlackRock, has 20% of Ukraine now. They own 20%. What about these other countries? Do you see other thriving economies doing that? I mean, to me, it's the end of the era of that.
The United States is a financialized economy. It doesn't produce anything.
Right.
It's Russia that produces. The United States can't produce 155 millimeter artillery shells, which is Ukrainians are running around trying to beg, borrow, and steal. Whereas Russia produces as many tanks in 1 month as the United States does in 1 year.
Wow.
So finally, and we'll end on this note, Scott Ritter was supposed to be on my panel with me, and he got on the plane and then was pulled off by 3 police officers, and they confiscated his passport.
Yeah, I think they were from actually the State Department. They weren't even actual police officers. Yeah. They were representatives of the State Department that were on there. And
because the airport can't do that. Customs or whatever, they can't confiscate passports. So they can take you off the plane. They can detain you, but they can't take your passport. That has to be done by, like you said, State Department. So so he couldn't come last minute on the plane. And they did that to humiliate him, And so then Judge Napolitano didn't come for different reasons. At first, I thought it was because of the whole thing with Scott, but apparently he chose on his own. Maybe that was because he was on the plane with him. That must have been frightening. So they both got off the plane and then they got their luggage back, but Scott did not get his passport back. And to date, I talked to Scott recently. They wouldn't tell him why, and he still doesn't have his passport. So he can't leave the country. And usually they do that if they have criminal charges pending. So I'm hoping they're not going to try something, but I don't know. This is a police state at this point. The U.S. is a police state.
This anti-Semitism and speaking out the way that he does, the Biden administration obviously doesn't like it. It's inconvenient to their narrative that to have a former UN weapons inspector who was in the military and incredibly highly credentialed and respected, all right?
Yeah.
To speak out like this is incredibly embarrassing for the Biden administration, I'm sure. And they don't like to hear what Scott Ritter has to say, even though he has to say it, and he's accurate and he's telling the truth. That kind of busts up their racket to have somebody of that authority doing that.
Yeah, and he was incarcerated and he was convicted of and they said of underage, being with someone who is underage, and the details that when we had Scott on the show, he explained that. So I would encourage people to look up the old show that I had with Scott, and he goes right into depth about what happened. And if anybody knows about intelligence, they come at men with that, and they come at women with financial crimes and other stuff, I guess. But it's a pretty common thing they come at them with. And when they want to destroy someone and destroy their reputation, well, and look at me, they destroyed my reputation by saying I lied on when I was an expert witness, which I didn't. They said I lied about my education, which I did not. They just try to destroy your reputation so that people won't take you seriously, and you can't work, you can't function, you can't get anywhere. And it's really fascist. And Biden, I tried to tell people, because he was like my monster, right? And now I feel like, Indy, he is the whole world's monster. He is a monster.
Well, and Bree Joy Gray is going through something similar right now, that the Zionist movement has been trying to not only get her thrown off the hill, which they did, allegedly that the woman that she eye-rolled, quote unquote, asked specifically to be on the show and to be interviewed by Brianna so she could confront her on this specific thing. And do you know what Brianna eye-rolled at? It was when she said, "Believe all women." as she's telling a perpetuating lie about rape on October 7th. I mean, I rolled so hard that my eyes would have been stuck back in the back of my head, number one. But on top of that, they then started mass emailing Patreon with a form letter telling everyone, telling Patreon that they are harboring somebody and that they're enabling somebody and empowering somebody who is against Israel, and they're trying to use terror, supporting Hamas, supporting terrorism, and you need to pull her. So they try to destroy your entire ability to earn and live, and they want to ruin you. That's what they're trying to do to everybody who's standing up.
And Steve Bannon, I would encourage everyone to look at Tucker's latest interview. And Steve Bannon was interviewed. And even if you don't agree with his politics, listen to his interview, because he said, look, we're in a war. And it's like the Revolutionary War. And he said, it's, you can't rely on Donald Trump. You can't rely on Bree. You can't rely on, he was giving examples of Republicans, or whatever, and the conservatives in his sphere. But I would expand that to lefties too, and say, you can't rely on Max Blumenthal. You can't rely on Katie Halper. You can't rely on, we have to all stand up and be the squeaky wheel. We have to stand up. And so it's like he was saying, it's like in the trenches in Normandy, you go a man up and then they get shot down. Sometimes they don't make it out of the trench, and then the next person comes up, and it's a horrible thing. But that's kind of the feeling that we're in. We're all just kind of having to stand up. I'm having to stand up as well. And we're in this moment in history where we can choose to be silent because it's more comfortable and it's more convenient in the immediate moment. But it won't be in our future, in our children's future, in our grandchildren's future. Their futures will be shot, and they'll be in a fascist regime, and they'll have a reality that we couldn't even imagine, because technology will be part of that oppression. So we have to, it was very important that we stand up right now, Indy, and we have to keep fighting. And so I would encourage people to watch that interview, because what he said was pretty inspiring. And it's like, okay, who's next up? Who's next up? Because we got to keep fighting. You can't rely on one person. It's got to be all of us in a wave, and we've got to keep saying no. And I want to remind everyone, the government works for you. It works for us. We do not work for the government. They work for us. And they make us feel intimidated, and they make us feel like they're coming after us. And I just want to turn it around and say, no. You work for me. I don't work for you.
Right.
Mind.
Where did that get lost along the way somewhere? And I'll tell you where. It's when corporations started buying our elections and buying our politicians that they realized they don't really work for us. You saw that Princeton study from 2012 that showed how little effect we actually have on policy. And as much as we would like for things to change, when 80% or 90% of the country wants a universal health care, Medicare for all, and we can't get it, but we continue to send bombs, $60 billion to Ukraine and $25 billion to Israel, and we fund everybody else in the world, but we can't. But we got bridges dropping into the water because a barge hit it in Baltimore, for example. Yes, like you said, we all need to stand up. We all need to be the squeaky wheel. I have been doing more writing personally at Indie Media Today. That's my Substack. I'm going to show that here really quickly on screen. So that's where I publish. I also, on behalf of Indie News Network, there's the INN Stack, and that's where you can find our weekly update that has Tara's show every week where she has one, as well as all of the other shows that we have on the network where we are being that squeaky wheel and we are supporting and amplifying independent media all the time. This is what we are, independent media, and I love that. We decided to be the media we wanted to see.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it. And in fact, on that note, I wanted to, because, we've reached the end of our time, and I appreciate you spending so much time with me. I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about your upcoming show and where people can watch it and how they can be supportive of INN and you and other creators that we have.
Oh, thank you so much. Really. So all of the network channels you can find at indienews.network. You can always find that. All of my personal channels are at indieleft.media. It's INDIE left.media. That's where my link tree is, and you can find all the channels, all the social media, all the ways to donate and support, as well as a link to INN there. They're kind of connected because this is my baby. I started as Indie Left Media and amplifying And then I moved on, you know, I found some creators and we decided to collaborate and create this network. But Indie Left Media still exists. It's got Indie Media Today as a Substack that publishes original articles. And my show, How Do We Miss That, is on Sunday nights at 10 o'clock p.m. Eastern at 7 Pacific. We've had 115 episodes already. It's also available on podcast, on Apple, Spotify, everywhere else. Look up How Did We Miss That by Indie Left Media and Indie News Network. And of course, look up The Politics of Survival. We're everywhere too. And subscribe and support Tara's channel and support independent media. As I say at the end of every show, we need it more than ever, folks, really.
Yeah, and I always love at the end of your show, or I can't remember if it's at the end or the beginning, the intro where it has the, who are these people? I always think that's so funny.
Well,
who are these people? I love that. I was going to ask you, is that a recording of anyone you know, or is that just a random recording?
No, that's Nancy Pelosi, and Jesse Jett clipped that.
That's Nancy Pelosi?
Let me play it again for you.
Okay.
Who are these people?
Oh my God, it didn't. Okay. I didn't recognize her voice. That is hilarious.
Yep. Yep. Because she would not believe us if she saw us. So I thought it was appropriate to have Nancy.
And she doesn't know who I am. That's for sure. She's like, who are these people? Yep. Well, anyway, thank you for the wonderful time. And as always, it's good to hang out with you. And, you know, to my audience, I wanted to give a big shout out. I noticed I've got more subscriptions. Thank you. I've got more followers on X. I do have, and I wanted, Reef, if you could put this up, the links to my Instagram and TikTok. I'm tiptoeing into that field. Remember that 2020, my name, Tara Reade, was called Election Interference by Zuckerberg, by his little empire, by Facebook and Insta, but we're trying again. We'll see. So I need more followers. So please follow me on Insta and TikTok if you do TikTok. And Reef will have the links there for you, and you can look for it on my link tree as well.
And they'll be in the description for this live stream for sure. And all the links for INN, for me, for everything, you'll see a lot of that in the description. Rockfin, Rumble, YouTube, everywhere. Just thank you really to everybody for subscribing. Sorry to interrupt you there.
Yeah. No, that's okay. And thank you to everyone for tuning in and listening to our conversation. And by the way, you know, buckle up because it's going to be a wild summer. There's some stuff coming. So buckle up. Good night, everybody. Okay.